Good morning, everyone. It's Monday, March 1st. From the San Antonio Express News, my name is Luis Vasquez, and this is your Express Briefing. All of the stories you need to know to start your day. You can expect early showers, but they'll clear up by the afternoon, and the high to reach just 51 degrees. The good news is that the rest of the week should stay dry. On Friday, President Joe Biden visited Texas for the first time since taking office. We have some of the biggest takeaways from his trip to Houston over at expressnews.com. Early Saturday, the House approved a $1.9 trillion pandemic relief bill. That ships the massive measure to the Senate, where Democrats seem bent on resuscitating their minimum wage push, and fights could erupt over state aid and other issues. And now let's move on to our top stories for the day. As the threat of the coronavirus came into focus a year ago, the Air Force scrambled to figure out how to continue basic training in San Antonio. The stakes were high. The virus threatened to sicken large number of recruits at Joint Base San Antonio Lackland and even halt the service's ability to bring in new airmen. In just under 11 months, the Air Force has graduated 27,486 recruits who spent weeks in basic training with no hospitalizations or deaths. Just under 6% of them, 1,604 recruits, turned up positive for COVID-19. Sig Christensen examines how the Air Force survived, what a failure would have meant, and what almost went wrong. The garden run by Linda and Larry Starnes at their farm near Beebe, Texas, 65 miles east of San Antonio, might be small at around an acre and a half, but it has a big presence at some of the city's best chef-driven restaurants. Those restaurants will be doing without for the next few months. Linda Starnes said they lost 90 to 95% of their crops in the freeze. With farming, it's just a part of it, like Hurricane Harvey. Harvey wiped us out, and some years the bugs get you. It's just the name of the game, Linda Starnes said. You just replant and start over. It's not a quick recovery. For ranchers, the freeze's toll was more of an emotional one, losing calves despite their efforts to keep them warm. Read more about how the weather hurt farmers and ranchers and where the silver linings are to be found in the latest from Chuck Blount, Paul Stephen, and Mike Sutter. A decade ago, after an Arctic cold spell knocked out power and left millions of Texas shivering in the dark, the Public Utility Commission's enforcement apparatus swung into action. Their aim? Punish the companies that had promised but failed to deliver electricity in an emergency. The energy companies eventually paid fines and settlements totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars for failing to prepare for the extreme weather. 2 weeks ago, history repeated. But the enforcement tools that worked to hold companies accountable for the 2011 failures had been removed under Governor Greg Abbott's appointees on the Utility Commission. Critics and former employees say the division was cut precisely because it was working. Both the commission and the governor's office disputed that getting rid of oversight and enforcement as a separate department diminished the commission's watchdog function. You can read more on this subject in Eric Dexheimer's and Jay Root's latest story. The 911 calls came before midnight February 8 to San Antonio area authorities. A man said he and about 80 other people were inside a whitewater tanker. The caller was unable to tell dispatchers where they were, but he said the truck had stopped next to the road. "Help! Holy God," a male voice is heard, apparently gasping for air, according to the 911 calls. It appears from one call that someone opened a hatch. A man shouts, "Let's go." Another says, "We're out of here." Guillermo Contreras examines why smuggling cases have been increasing since President Joe Biden took office, how the COVID-19 pandemic has played a role, and what the federal government is doing about the situation at the border. Check out the full story over at expressnews.com. San Antonio officials have used the wireless emergency alert system to trumpet a statewide mask mandate and warn against social gatherings ahead of holidays. Alerts were also sent about the risk of icy roads as the recent winter storm approached. But the system was silent as power went out across the city, and again when a boil water notice was issued. Find out why over at expressnews.com. Next up are your need-to-know headlines. You can find all of these headlines and more inside of your Express News subscription. San Antonio added 10,000 first-dose vaccination appointment slots at the Alamodome on Sunday evening, but all of the appointments were taken within minutes, according to city spokeswoman Laura Mays. The coronavirus situation in San Antonio continued to improve Sunday as officials reported 318 new cases, no new deaths, and fewer people hospitalized. CPS Energy's top executive said Friday that the utility may have to slow its shift to clean energy and maybe build another natural gas-fired power plant because of the financial blow it took from last week's deep freeze. Now an investment capital guy, former Mayor Henry Cisneros hopes his survey of 1,800 major projects across the nation will help the Biden administration lay plans for infrastructure bill due in the spring. It includes several dozen from Bexar County. The San Antonio Public Library is seeking to strike a balance between free expression and its core function of providing quiet places to read, study, and check out materials is considering a policy that could formally create a free expression area outside each of its 27 locations. Fox News host Tucker Carlson said, "There's no evidence that white supremacists were responsible for what happened on January 6. That's a lie. We have the PolitiFact Texas rating for that claim over at expressnews.com. A witness who testified during the murder trial of Charles Harrelson is suing a Spotify podcast for defamation and fraudulent inducement after she says her interview was manipulated to suggest she was somehow involved in a scheme to send Harrelson to prison. Distracted when reaching for a cup lid, a driver killed 2 people on Interstate 35 and was sent to prison. 31-year-old Fermin Hernandez Jr. admitted his guilt and drew a 5-year term. Hernandez, a legal resident holding a green card, faces deportation upon his release. At least 3 Texas lawmakers are calling for the state's top utility regulators to step down after a lackluster legislative performance about deadly power outages. San Antonio Dr. Zeke Silva III has been appointed to lead a national committee tasked with helping shape the future of medical payments. UT Health San Antonio has received a $6 million academic research grant from a state-funded program that invests billions in cancer-fighting efforts. It's the 3rd top grant since 2018 for the Mays Cancer Center. The San Antonio Police Union made some effort to meet the city's priorities while not conceding any point during a second negotiation session to reach a new labor contract Friday. We have where things stand now over at expressnews.com. On President Joe Biden's diverse cabinet picks, columnist Elena Yella writes, quote, "It has become clear that objections to some of Biden's cabinet nominees have been rationalized and whitewashed as everything other than what they are, racist and petty." The transgender sports question is one that's been building momentum over the past year. In 2020, 18 states considered bills restricting transgender sports participation, with Idaho passing its bill into law. Columnist Gilbert Garcia examines the situation in Texas in his latest, quote, "Dan Patrick revives his old war against transgender kids." In April 2018, Mayor Ron Nirenberg pledged to create 70,000 jobs within 2 years, more jobs than any mayoral administration in San Antonio's history. In his latest column, Greg Jefferson points out Nirenberg failed to make good on that pledge, but has gained respect in the city's business circles nonetheless. Postponement of the NCAA tournament wasn't an option last year, and it won't be this year either. But while that meant scrapping the event altogether in 2020, March Madness will go on no matter what this time around, writes Mike Finger. Take a closer look at what that actually means over at expressnews.com. This week in history, on March 4th, 1923, Luis Santikos opens the Palace Theater downtown with entrances on Alamo Plaza and Lozoya Street and a large entryway connecting the two spaces. The theater originally showcased live theater and musical performances. Later, it would become a discount movie theater before being torn down in 1954. You can learn more about the famous theater over at expressnews.com. Wind energy is increasingly powering the state of Texas, and Josh and Moses Rangel want to be part of the change. Wind turbines are the dinosaurs of renewable energy. They're not as new as solar power and not as flashy as an energy technology as batteries or hydrogen. But there's a lot of land across Texas on which to build wind turbines, and in 2020, they contributed 25% of the electricity in Texas. Last year, Rangel Renewables erected enough wind turbines around the country to generate 1 gigawatt of power. For reference, all the wind farms in Texas produced 8 gigawatts of electricity combined in November. The young company is growing rapidly, and the brothers have eyes on the next leap for wind power, offshore turbines. Check out our Q&A with Rangel Renewables over at expressnews.com. "18-year-old Sage Martin from Oldham County 4-H in far north Texas started off the San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo's Junior Market Steer auction on Saturday with Jimmy Buffett, her 2021 Grand Champion Junior Market Steer. WM Rusty Rush, CEO and president of Rush Enterprises, scored the winning bid of $63,939. Head over to expressnews.com for more on the San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo. The Cristel Culinary Corner food truck in New Braunfels brings together Korean, Philippine, and Haitian flavors. Check out our full 52 weeks of food truck review over at expressnews.com. Paul Stephen has your guide to the best way to store and reheat leftover corn and flour tortillas in his latest article. So everything in your yard froze? Calvin Finch explores what was most damaged in the garden by our unprecedented freeze with tips on how to address it. In his down-to-earth column, Neil Sperry addresses readers' questions about allergies, ground cover agulla, and more. The 2021 Valero Texas Open in April will be attended by a limited number of spectators, tournament officials have announced. And that's all for today. This was your Express briefing for Monday, March 1st. My name is Luis Vasquez. Please consider becoming an Express News subscriber to get in-depth coverage on all the stories you heard today. Also, be sure to rate and review this podcast inside of your Apple Podcast app, as it really helps the show. Have a wonderful day, everyone.